The Misa ng Bayang Pilipino is an attempt to inculturate the Roman order of the Mass in the context of the culture and traditions of Filipino Catholics. Its main aim is to communicate more fully to the Filipino faithful the spiritual and doctrinal wealth of the Roman order of the Mass by re-expressing through dynamic equivalence its theological content. The Misa ng Bayang Pilipino is not a work of liturgical creativity, but of dynamic translation of the order of the Mass. Its point of departure is the Roman Missal, issued by the Holy See, with which it conserves substantial unity and not uniformity alone. The work of translating the Misa ng Bayang Pilipino into the local culture was guided by the following official documents: the General Instruction of the Roman Missal, Eucharistiae Participationem of 27 April 1973, Cum Leprevois of 25 January 1969, Au cours des derniers mois of June 2, 1968, and the Rescript for India in 25 April 1969, and lastly, the Missal for the Dioceses of Zaire in April 30 of 1988. In conformity with the article of Sacrosanctum Concilium number 40, the Misa ng Bayang Pilipino was presented in the year 1974 and 1975 to a group of theologians, liturgists, cultural anthropologists, linguistics, and the Department of National Language for evaluation and critique. In 1975, the Episcopal Commission on Liturgy made revisions on the proposed texts, and in 1976, in the Assembly of the Bishops, this was presented to them, and the bishops unanimously voted for this. In succeeding years, some revisions also were done to the approved text, and in 1989, the second text was presented again to the Assembly of the Bishops, and the bishops again unanimously voted for this revised text. In 1991, the final text was made and was presented to Rome for the Recognitio of Rome. On December 7, 1979, the Misa ng Bayang Pilipino was used as the culminating celebration of the International Mission Congress held in the Philippines. This was an international celebration and was sponsored by the Vatican, and this was the order of the Mass that was used for the celebration. The Misa ng Bayang Pilipino, the inculturated Eucharistic celebration for the dioceses of the Philippines, communicates to the Filipino Catholic faithful the spiritual and doctrinal wealth of the Roman order of the Mass with the use of language, gestures, and symbols called from the Filipino pattern of thought, speech, behavior, and cultural values. The Misa ng Bayang Pilipino offers the Filipino faithful a kind of worship that reflects their culture and that which they can call their own. The Synod of Bishops paid particular attention to the inculturation of the faith. The new evangelization calls for particular attention to the inculturation of the faith that can transmit the gospel in its capacity to value what is positive in every culture. Inculturation involves the efforts to have the gospel take flesh in each people's culture. The language of the Misa ng Bayan is simple, dignified, prayerful, and captures the thought and language pattern of Filipinos. It is dignified, lofty, literary, and even poetic. Considerable effort was taken to incorporate elements of the Tagalog language, such as idiomatic expressions and other words and phrases that communicate Filipino values and images of daily Filipino life. The introductory rites are composed of the entrance procession, veneration of the cross, penitential rite, cold pagpapakumbaba, sprinkling with holy water, sign of peace, the singing of the Gloria, and the collect. The veneration of the cross is a notable variation in the introductory rites, just as Filipinos have a great devotion to the cross. Crucifixes are usually visible in Filipino homes. The sign of the cross is a part of significant moments of the day for Filipinos. The veneration of the cross demonstrates the theological content of the Mass is the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. The sign of peace concludes the penitential rite. The Filipino social system of mediation is evoked in the penitential rite when the people turn to the priest for prayer in their behalf. The people's request for mediation, expressed in courteous and studied language, suggests that Filipino attitude of shyness and unworthiness, hiya, in the presence of a person of higher status, here God Himself. To begin the liturgy of the Word, the Gospel book is venerated. This expresses reverence towards God's Word and resolve to listen attentively to this Word. The readers are blessed through the gesture, manu po. This expresses the Filipino culture of asking for the priest or an elder's blessing before performing a special task. The reader takes the priest's hand to his forehead, signifying respect for authority, as the latter says, "Kaawaan ka ng Diyos," or "May God show you His mercy." During the general intercessions, the faithful kneel, as Filipinos usually do, as a gesture of ardent petition. The posture is, however, not alien to liturgical practice, since this is done in the Good Friday liturgy. The Filipino Order's liturgy of the Eucharist follows the Roman plan with the elements corresponding to the Eucharistic action of Jesus. The Eucharistic prayer is ritualized in order to highlight this prayer par excellence of the Church through the lighting of candles, the ringing of bells, throwing of flower petals, and the sign of the cross to begin the prayer. Several cultural values were incorporated in this part of the Misa, such as utang na loob o reciprocity, pakikisama and pagdadamayan as expressions of solidarity. The context of God's initiative and concern for man was expressed in terms pagbabakasakali or risk, and awa, malasakit, kagandahang loob as benevolence. To conclude the celebration, the priest delivers the exhortation or paghahabilin, which evokes the reminders parents give to sons and daughters as they take leave. The cross is venerated in the same way it was done during the introductory rites. A doxology accompanies the raising of the cross and reminds the assembly to live according to the spirit of the Eucharistic celebration.